Welcome back to the Patriot Party, where truth, transparency, and constitutional principles come before politics. The Patriot Party movement is focused on re-empowering we the people, restoring accountability, and putting America first through honest conversations and real solutions. America first, not America only, because we lead by example. Today's conversation lives at the intersection of voter psychology, election law, and constitutional structure. Chad Peace is a legal strategist for the Independent Voter Project and founder of IVC Media, where he works on election reform, ballot access, and digital persuasion strategy. He's been featured on ABC News discussing record number of Americans identifying as independents, particularly young voters. Chad, welcome to the Patriot Party.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Chad, we're seeing more Americans, especially younger voters, identify as independent. What's driving that shift?
Well, I mean, we've all seen it. It's not like it happened overnight. You see, it's been happening for decades, right? I mean, even look how like the Tea Party developed, and then you had remember Occupy Wall Street. Now, all these things are like I think a manifestation of the same grievances. It's like nobody trusts either of the two parties to be representing their interests, right? And then so voters are kind of forced to pick one side or the other, or a candidate that comes and seems to be willing to give a middle finger to the two forces that are really trying to divide everybody. And then the result of that is that even folks that vote Republican or vote Democrat, I always say independents are all over the map. You can find them left of the Democratic Party, right of the Republican Party, right? But at the end of the day, I think they embody like the spirit is my right to vote and my opinions are mine. They're not a party's. They're not even the group that I may be a part of. Like I'm allowed to have my own opinions. And you see that today is like people just dissatisfied with leadership in both parties. And they're saying, look, I don't want to define myself by these two parties. I'm an independent.
Yeah, I'm a registered independent. I mean, I am. I don't know when it happened. Maybe you can tell me. Sometime in the past, it just shifted to being about more about the party than the people. I mean, when you have parties, the people needing things desperately, needing legislation, needing things, and parties on during election times, oh no, we're not going to pass this because it'll make that party look good or it'll make this
Yep.
party look good. Well, okay, but you were sent there by we the people to do a job for we the people, so that doesn't add up to me.
Yeah, well, like, let's start with a perfect example the stock trading ban. Most people are, yeah, we should have a stock trading ban for Congress, right? The Democrats have their version, the Republicans have their version, right? The reality is the people will probably be for either one, but they use it as a rallying cry for their respective elections, saying, "Look, we support what you want. It's just we can't get this passed because the Republicans won't do this." And then the other side does the exact same thing, right? So they pretend like they're going to answer the problem so that they have their campaign talking points, demonize the other side for being the responsible party.
Are you familiar with our federal policy producer that we have built? It's an AI enhanced federal policy producer, a software that we're scaling up to give to the people and also to for an education tool for the American Institute for Civic Leadership, which is a nonprofit we launched. And they're going to use it for competition tool and other things. But basically, you can take data points, you can take a problem, or you can take an idea and put it in, and it spits out Washington-ready legislation that is built on constitutional guardrails rails that is built on data points, not donors. What's smartest for the American people? So we spit out legislation, the first ever in history answer to gun violence without violating the Second Amendment. It's proof of concept on our website. We got 8 bill proof of concepts. One of them is a healthcare bill that is currently in the top 3 with Thune and Johnson to take the place of Obamacare, which will save the American people $2 trillion a year. We've run all the stress tests. It's using HSA accounts, high interest state-run HSA accounts that roll over. So if you stay healthy or you get wealthy, no matter what your income bracket. And then we're shrinking the third-party system to use for catastrophic insurance and chronic, and then people that absolutely can't afford for it. So it actually shrinks the $5 trillion down to $3 trillion a year. So, and it's built on data points, not donors. So there's no special interest groups. It's just for we the people.
I'm not. I should be. I'd love to report on it on IVN, or I'd offer you to author a story on it. We'll publish it. I say people always go, well, what's your opinion at Independent Voter Network? It's like, I write articles, I have my opinion. I have other people. You don't agree with something, write your own, right? We'll publish it and expose people. And if you're afraid of people reading what you say or being exposed to what you say, well, you must not have very much confidence in your opinion, right?
You know what's so cool too? The American Institute for Civic Leadership. So I designed a curriculum 3 months ago for a civic curriculum for middle school and high school to introduce civil discourse back into the curriculum. To one side gets the living document, the other side gets the originalist. They debate the issues civilly. The teacher is the coach. That way, it starts resonating at a young age what their beliefs are. It's got media literacy in it, and so the civic educators here in Louisiana who did the final approval, not only did they help me align my vision with Louisiana standards, but their decades of experience. They said, well, we're missing here, the kids are missing here. So we exceeded the standards. And I'm proud to say 3 months after I designed it, before we have taken one donation, it is being taught at my daughter's high school to the whole 6th grade class as a pilot program.
Well, see, sounds like you built a little bit of credibility there, though, that they do it. I mean, that to your question, why is it growing, and then why now? I think is it expanding. It's a combination. It's a combination of society, technology, the ability to have conversations and share information more seamlessly, right? And people are going and saying, that's bullshit. I like on both sides. They're just calling it bullshit. Like, no, it's not. There's not some rocket science behind why you're saying this one. In fact, you're wrong, and I can prove that, right? And so I think that's what you're seeing. And politics is just so far behind society, right? But and has an invested self-interest in keeping us divided. I guarantee you could, right, find people in the MAGA space and people that are have Bernie Sanders stickers on them, and there's probably 90% of the stuff they'll be like, yeah, I totally agree with that, right?
Listen, I'm going to give you a case in point. This blew my mind. So one of my daughters, she lives out, her husband's stationed at the Air Force Base outside of San Francisco, and she's an artist. So I flew out there to see her, and she was setting up these art fairs outside of San Francisco, and, there was a lot of very liberal people, and we were sitting there talking to these festivals, and I was telling them about the Patriot Party and the curriculum and the Constitution and all that, and they're like, that sounds great, that's cool. They said, the way the media is portraying us, we're not that far apart. We just want to agree to disagree on certain issues. And I'm like, well, that is exactly it. But the way the media is portraying it is they report on the families that don't come together for Thanksgiving, they don't come together for Christmas, and they make that like it's it. And that is the polarization there too. It's partly, it's partly they're partly to blame.
Well, I think more than partly to blame.
Yeah.
It's a system, and it's not just the parties themselves. It's the apparatus, it's the news organizations, it's the industry. I mean, like the political consultants, the donor bases that all have grown up around the system, right? And it disincentivizes working across or saying, wow, maybe that's a good idea, because once you do that, those divisions start collapsing, right? But they maintain the power. Like, look, we filed a lawsuit in New Jersey. Why did we pick New Jersey? We filed a lawsuit saying, and we took this all the way to the Supreme Court. Okay, we picked New Jersey because in New Jersey, half of the voters actively registered. They say, I want to vote. I'm going to register to vote. I'm talking about citizens, okay? And they say, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to register independent, knowing in New Jersey they're not allowed to vote in a primary election because they chose to not join a party. Our question is, wait a second, that process is funded by the taxpayers, right? So doesn't New Jersey, even if they're going to have closed primaries, fine, the parties have their private rights, they can have primaries here, but this is a taxpayer-funded process, so don't you have to have an opportunity for the 50% of voters who are independents to be able to participate, right? And it comes down to, and you go all the way to the Supreme Court, right? Our question for the Supreme Court is, does every voter, regardless of party affiliation, have the right to participate at every stage of the public election process? Because the Third Circuit right now said, literally, the opinion in the Third Circuit right now, it's an unpublished opinion, only one judge signed it in our lawsuit. I argued in Philadelphia. They said, when a voter is confronted with a tough choice of participating or joining a party, that voter should simply join a party. That's literally the precedent of the Third Circuit. And I say, I don't care whether you're a Democrat, Libertarian, Republican, or whatever. Think about what that president now, that current president in the Third Circuit says. It says you should be forced to join a party if you want to vote at the first stage of the public election process. And I go, what is the First Amendment right? The right of association. Okay, if I have the right to associate, I also have the right not to associate. Correct? So, isn't that a violation of my fundamental right to vote? I shouldn't have to join a party. What if the two parties were, some crazy extremist? I have to join them in order to participate. So that's the basis of our legal strategy, right? And, certainly the Democrats don't like it, the Republicans don't like it. But I also point out that within the party, there actually are a lot of legislators who do support what we're doing, because they're the types of Democrats and Republicans that understand that they don't mind having voters outside their party able to participate, because that's an opportunity to talk to them, to convince them, and they believe that their authority should derive from the voters, plural, voting for them, not just their party base. And the reality is right now, partisan primaries and even closed primaries are really where people get elected. General elections are just a show because of gerrymandering and all that.
Well, are you of the belief that in order to get like true restructuring of the party system, we would have to restructure the electoral colleges?
No.
No, you think we could keep the same system for the electoral colleges and still have it set up in a way? What would that look like? But map that out for me.
Well, so here, I always because look, in the reform space, I get a lot of folks that are for the national popular vote and all that stuff. I actually think the Electoral College was created very smartly to decentralize power, right? So imagine if California just said, well...
No, I know that, but it was created it was geared towards, the way it's created and split up is geared towards a two-party system. I'm not saying do away with it, but some people believe it's got to be restructured because that's the root of not being able to have a true three-party system.
I'd say not necessarily, but first for context, the presidential system is completely independent from every other election, right? Because every other election is a state-run election, right? It's for state, even congressional members, right? It's a state election process. The president is the one election that's a federal process. But if you go back and say, who were electors originally supposed to be under the Constitution, right? Today, we go to a primary and we vote for a candidate, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not really who we're supposed to be voting for. We're supposed to be voting for an elector, right? An elector that then goes to the Electoral College, right, to then select who the right president would be. So, and the biggest thing why it's gone to like this two-party state is whoever said that electors are supposed to go to the Electoral College as a monolith on behalf of the state, right? So what I'm saying is, take California. We have 55 electoral votes, right? Or take a large state like Texas or Florida for the Republicans. There's nothing in the Constitution that says all 55 electors go to the Constitution on behalf of their political party, right? There's 55 electors for the state of California. Each one should be taken individually to represent their district, right? Mm-hmm. And so you should be having this Electoral College with opinions all over the map from people at college who go to there for the specific purpose of representing, right, their community. You could also do that. I mean, simply getting rid of the winner takes all rule would solve a lot of the problem. Why do we have a winner takes all rule, right? That would be my question.
So would it take legislation to solve it? Could it be solved? And if so, how would we map that out?
Well, it would take legislation really on a state level. I haven't really game theory to how you could go through on a federal level. I think you could make the same legal argument that
I could probably put the problem in and it spit me out something on my federal policy producer.
Software, but I mean, if you took the same legal principle though, right? My right to vote in California, I believe, is violated by this winner takes all system that has basically taken my right to have an elector in So look, if the person I voted for is not a Democrat, just for hypothetical purposes, okay?
Uh-huh.
But the state of California, I'm not saying just my vote, my region, my area, district votes in a different way than the Democratic Party. But the Democratic Party, they got to second my vote, right, and take it and put it on behalf of the Democratic Party. So if you're looking at it from an individual voting rights perspective, it's like, what gave the state of California the right to take all 55 of our electors, collectivize them, and say that whichever party wins all 55 gets all 55? Because that was never the intent. Now, I could file a legal argument. I think, theoretically it works. Like, is that going to win? I think I can argue for maybe 50 years down the line, you can keep fighting it, right? But the reason we've approached the legal fight the way we have is we believe that the political process really does start at the state level. And that the reason you have the two-party stranglehold in terms of financing and all that is because on a national level in all 50 states, it's all organized around a closed primary system, right? Where 90% of the real decisions are being made in those primaries. And in New Jersey, you have a 10% turnout. 10% turnout in the primaries. So, okay, split that up. That means 5% in the Democrat, 5% in the Republican. Now you have plurality voting in the closed primaries. You could win with 25, 30% of the vote. Just crunch the numbers. You only need 1.5%, 2% of the electorate to win an office whose job is to represent everybody, right? So that's why we go there believe that's the core and why both parties don't like it. Really, most simply, is because it creates competition, right? If you don't know how every voter is going to vote when they show up, it creates more competition. It makes it harder for the money to mobilize the right voters because they don't know who's going to vote for who.
Yeah, and it kind of goes with your movement is, we put out a thing a few months back, where we were urging for people to vote for the most qualified candidate, not party politics, because we live in a merit-based society and the best person should win. The best qualified person should win.
I think it's pretty simple. And you know what? Democrats agree with it. When you talk to people one-on-one, Democrats agree with it, liberals agree with it, conservatives agree with it. You say, yeah, best. And then everybody's frustrated with the quality of representation. And I always say, it's not even as much of the people who get elected. It's more the way they behave, right, when they get into office. Is like, so put somebody in an environment where they, to get reelected, they have to run in a low turnout Democrat primary or a low turnout Republican primary. They have to act a certain way. So any issue that gets out of that partisan box, they then have somebody that'll run against them and can overtake them by simply just saying, look, they're not a real Republican. They just did something that's not super Republican, and vice versa, right? And that's the reality of it, and that's why they're all scared of their own shadows, right? So it's truly is a nonpartisan issue because, like I said, going back to it, there's a lot of Democrats and Republicans that privately would really love to not have this nationalized, partisan primary system. But publicly, they can't even take that position because they'll get eaten up by their own party. And the perfect example of that is in Texas, where you have the Attorney General. I'm not a Ken Paxton basher or anything, but look, he said right now he's trying to close Texas's primaries. So now step back from a philosophical perspective. This is the ultra-conservative constitutional Attorney General of Texas. What is he saying? Texas has never ever registered by party, right? So I'd say that's a good thing. Why the heck should I have to tell the state what private association I'm with, right? Texas has always taken that position. The Republican Party, a private organization, and the 5 or 10 people that showed up to their meeting said, we want to close Texas's primary. So now Paxton takes his position as the Attorney General and says, I'm not going to defend the laws of Texas that say we have open primaries because you can't have a closed primaries if you haven't registered your party with the state, right? So he says, I'm going to take my position as Attorney General, not defend our 100-plus year rules, right? 200-year rules, of not registering our party and having primaries. They're partisan, but they don't require you to tell you what party you're from. And I'm going to instead go and say that the people want what the Republican Party said in their private convention. So this has created an interesting dynamic. You have the Attorney General, who's supposed to be representing everybody, saying, I won't defend state law because I think it ought to be what the Republican Party said. And then you have the Secretary of State, Jay Nelson, who is literally on the fighting side on the other side, saying, both Republicans, saying, no, I'm going to defend Texas voters' right not to have to tell the state what party they're registered with. And for the parties, they can have all their First Amendment rights to nominate, funnel money, endorse, do whatever they want. But when it comes to the state apparatus, I'm not going to advantage one private party over the other. And so those are the types of dynamics that, like, CNN and Fox and stuff are never going to report, because it exposes, right, the weakness of the system.
You touched down on something I wanted to say earlier, but we got off topic. Our first thing is to scale this policy producer up. We're working on getting that scaled up right now. But the second thing, we're doing a fast. Have you ever heard of Fast News Channel? It's a streaming news channel to like Roku, Samsung, Amazon TV, and then simulcast to all the social media platforms. It's using technology that hadn't been used before to stream out. And we're doing Truth Matters News, which is going to be reported on fact-based, nonpartisan. Everything that's reported is independent and verified. No rumor mills, through a constitutional lens. We may debate hot topics with a living document originalist, but everything is through fact-based, constitutional lens, nonpartisan.
I mean, like I think, like I said, I think the more people are exposed to things that are not filtered, or, hey, have some talking head tell you what happened through their frame of lens, or whatever they're told to be is the frame of lens.
Yeah.
I have this debate with people all the time. Is like, we have all this stuff. You remember that CNN commercial, like, this is an apple, right? Because we can't do it.
That's old.
The reality is, facts actually don't matter as much as we're talking about. Yes, they matter, but not nearly as much as everybody says. How you align the facts is much more important than what the individual facts are, right?
Being given all the facts to connect the dots yourself. That's
correct.
Yeah, that's not just one fact, so it looks like what you wanted to report, but everything.
You say, oh my gosh, Matt went and just punched that guy in the face. Oh, well, Matt,
right?
Well, did you tell him that other guy was pushing his daughter on the ground or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, or attacked his wife.
Correct.
Yeah.
So right now, the media and the parties, they'll go, hey, look at what happened like this through this very narrow lens.
Polarization.
Right. And you say, the more people can say, you know what else can I see if I just tilt the lens a little bit, the more people are realizing, like, no, the narrative is as important or more important than the facts, because the narrative is what draws the conclusions about all the things you didn't see. Right?
People are hungry for the truth, and I'll tell you another social trend. People are tired of endless criticism with no solutions and talking in circles, because that's part of the problem. That's why we won't even have a guest on our show if they're going to criticize something, if they don't have the framework to a solution, because we like to say we are about solutions, not problems. We got endless channels that'll talk in circles. That's not what we're trying to do.
I know.
So I got a question for you. It kind of gets into a little bit of technical stuff. You kind of touched down a little bit earlier. So you got closed primaries, open primaries, ranked choice voting, ballot access laws. How do these structural rules shape behavior, and what incentives do they actually create?
Right. Well, I mean, you got to look at if you look at behavior and who gets elected through the lens of the incentives, right? Of like what do you need to do to get elected? Like I said, you take closed primaries in a state like New Jersey, I think is the worst offender, right? And actually, I should step back. The first question you should ask yourself is, who should a representative represent, right? Should they represent their party, or should they represent their community as a whole, right? If you believe they should represent their community as a whole, then that's a less partisan viewpoint of the world, right? Then you say, where does the right to vote derive? Does it derive from my joining another group, or does it derive in myself as a citizen, right? I take the view that your right to vote derives from citizenship, right? It doesn't derive at the moment I joined a political party. So if you believe that, then I say, how can you have closed primaries? How can you take our taxpayer dollars and the state apparatus to start a nomination proceeding? Okay. Why it's important to your question about incentives. So I talked about earlier, if you have to get reelected in that closed primary system, you always have the incentive to remain partisan because you'll never survive the primary, right? Now, I like the situation because now there's all this talk about ranked choice voting, and you'll see everybody from Donald Trump saying, and I'm not a Trump basher, nor do I have a picture on his wall, right? I actually, think some of the things he's done are pretty amazing.
50-50, 60-40,
It doesn't matter. We're allowed to have, like, say, good on you here, and come on, man, here.
I mean, we're human. You're not gonna line up with everything somebody does.
Right, and but there's no secret. He's posted this, I hate ranked choice voting, right? And because of this, it's his inability to have more control over the election process in Alaska. Well, guess what? I'm in San Diego. You know who hates ranked choice voting here is the Democratic Party and labor apparatus, which I don't even like. I'm not even anti-labor, but they control the process here. They don't want ranked choice voting to advance here. Why did you get ranked choice voting in New York? Because it was an agreement between the Democratic Party apparatus and the reform community. You say, well, what do you mean? Because New York at a municipal level, unlike most municipalities, they have nonpartisan elections. New York at a municipal level also has partisan primaries, and they're closed. They have closed primaries. So the deal was, fine, we'll take ranked choice voting, but we're going to only do it in the primary, and we're going to keep closed primaries. So what does that mean? It means, okay, we're going to put it in the primary. Democrats can argue amongst ourselves, and we can have more choices, but a Democrat's still going to get elected. You're not going to allow any third party or Republican or anybody else to get elected in New York by using this ranked choice system in the general election, right? So that is the nuance of the interplay, right? There's ways to take ranked choice voting and do it very poorly because you can create a game theory where the powers that be can rig it. There's ways to do it in support of voters that protects the ability, or I should say protects against the ability to game it and offer voters more choice and reduce the spoiler effect and all that. The same is with any system. But so, for example, if you take like Alaska, that went from a closed primary system to a nonpartisan primary with the top 4 primary. And now you think about the incentives, right? The primary becomes way less important. Remember, turnout's like 25 to 50% depending on where you are in the primary. Primary, if you're a credible candidate, you're going to get through the primary in a top 4 system, right? So now the only real election is the general election when the most people participate. Now, a representative's incentives are fundamentally different than in New Jersey. Because now as they lead, they have to do things that would make somebody be like, oh, well, they're not all that bad. I'll give them my second vote. Or they have to talk to the other voters because you can't get reelected by only listening to a narrow universe, right? And if a state like Delaware or something took what Alaska did, it would be the Democrat leadership doing the same thing Donald Trump's doing in Alaska. So I don't know if that answered your incentive question, but it's what becomes a natural consequence of the system that you've created on the incentive structure.
Okay, well, what unintended consequences have you seen in reform efforts?
Unintended?
Uh-huh.
Well,
Unintended.
so here we go. I got a lot of heat from my friends when I worked on the top 2 primary in California, okay? Because they, oh wait, you got top 2, you're insulating the 2 parties, okay? You say, okay, in some sense there are, but I'd say the purpose of the Independent Voter Project is, look, election reform is difficult and you have to take it in stages. But what we did fundamentally was something I think powerful. We said primary elections don't belong to the 2 parties, they belong to the voters. And we legally changed the purpose from the purpose under the old system was to elect a nominee of the political parties. The purpose now is to narrow the candidate field to for the general election to two, right? So you say, okay, well, what's unintended consequence? Well, there's a lot of I've railed about the consequences of closed primaries. Well, the consequence of top two primary, admittedly, is like, look at our governor's race. You're going to get two candidates that advance to the general election. Could be two Republicans. It could be a Republican and a Democrat that has 18% support, right? Where you have a competition between two candidates who, aren't very broadly appealing, right? Or you could have, the lack of the lack of third parties in the general election. That's an unintended consequence because the first purpose was to make every voter and candidate treated the same, which is why now Independent Voter Project says, okay, California, why don't we do what Alaska did, and let's go to 4 or 5 candidates in the general election so that we get more voices and more competition, and we don't have really what becomes an arbitrary, like it's kind of random who's going to move on in a governor's race of that size based on who decides to run, right? And the composition of the candidate field. So, like I said, that's an unintended consequence that we will admit, but I will argue till the day I die that top two nonpartisan primary is substantially better than a closed primary.
Okay. So where do you think reforms backfire?
When they aren't fully thought out, right? And then so you've gotten places where, look, I might take some heat from some of my friends in the ranked choice voting world, where like there's great folks there, but some of them would go and take ranked choice voting at all costs, right? I actually think that New York is in the progression of history. It's a positive step to have brought ranked choice voting into the primaries. But if you go to a city and you put in ranked choice voting, say let's get rid of our primary, let's put in ranked choice voting, and like let's not think about any of the unintended consequences, and set up an opportunity for the political players and the funders to be able to game that system because they can pack the ballots and there's an unlimited candidate field, so you can basically pack the field with several candidates, then focus the attention on only a few, whatever. So I go on forever, but my point being, the reform community needs to understand how the game works, right? And if somebody, because they have money or because it's somebody in leadership that can say, hey, look, if you just do it this way, we can get it passed, or hey, if you follow this, then we can get your stuff passed, and don't understand that you need to think about how is this going to be gamed. Good reforms can be taken by people, very sophisticated people, and put into practice, and then the consequence being something that's even worse, a worse situation than you started with.
Yeah. Do you think, though, if you look at the root of that, like if in those instances or in a lot of those instances, that because when they're building the laws, a lot of times they include this line because this person to make this person happy in this line, and at the end of it, they end up with an unenforceable bill that does nothing because they had to piece it together instead of doing something that makes sense.
Well, it happens, and frankly, we have unenforceable bills all the time that get passed and they know they're unenforceable, but make great campaign headlines, right? Mailers, they did this, and then 5 years later, the Supreme Court strikes it down. Everybody knew they were going to strike it down, right? And that's unfortunate. One thing in all this bagging on the, quote, on the insiders and stuff, I will say is like, I think there's actually way more good people in government than we give credit for. It's that they're constrained by all these things. And
this is what I always say. Everybody thinks that we're going to have the answer because we're going to get the perfect person that this can't. I say you cannot fix a broken system in the broken system. It's like driving a car and trying to fix the engine. You have to stop it, get out, and look at it from outside and fix it with an outside perspective.
I mean, you said it better than I ever could. That's exactly right. You couldn't put like, a savior down in the system that's all messed up and expect it to be fixed. It won't. And that's why we focus on structure. And a lot of people go, well, what do you think about Donald Trump? Or what do you think about this? And I go, I have my own kind of opinions. I'm probably more nuanced than the media might suggest, but like, I'm not that's just who's elected right now in this. I'm focused on a
It,
system.
it's subjective. What does it have to do with what we're trying to do? We're
Correct. It
trying to do
has nothing to do
structural
with,
change.
and
We
in
have
fact,
nothing to do with this.
correct. And in fact, if you believe in structural reform, the outcome of who gets elected is irrelevant, right? Because all you're talking about is the fairness and right and what are the incentives. And that's why you asked a good question before. If your incentives are to have the represent the broadest section of the electorate, which I think they should be. You can disagree with that, but that's what I think the incentive should be, right? The outcome may not be the one you want, right? That's
Yeah.
right, because a majority of people might not have agreed with you, which also comes down to just a fundamental theory of government. Should we be electing people? Should we try to elect people who agree with us on everything? Or should we be electing people who are the people who can listen to opinions and take informed positions on trying to resolve conflict rather than magnifying conflict, right? Now, there's also
Well, I think as our society starts to take a step back and question and want more, more narrative, that we're going in that direction, because the direction we've been going is with these echo chamber, emotional knee jerk, keep us in. They want clicks, views. That's all it's about.
yeah,
But if we step back and we do critical thinking, independent critical thinking, I think that's the direction that we're going,
I think
and that's why we think education is where it's going to start.
I honestly think so. Dude. People all the time is like, "Oh, don't you just get like so pessimistic, like and just frustrated, and you want to go?" I go, I actually, if you like looking at the things like going on, it may not be like ever present in the everyday politics yet. Like, I just see like I see an optimism. I see like, why are people rejecting the party? Because maybe they consider themselves MAGA and they have a friend that's a huge Bernie fan, and they go out and they drink beers together and they realize like, okay, that's cool that you're MAGA. That's cool that you like Bernie, and we like each other and we agree on a whole bunch of stuff. Why does that mean that we have to be on these sides that suggest the other side is the end of the world if like they get elected? You know?
But here's the thing, too. Here's the thing, and this is where the media comes in as well, and the structure of everything. And I was talking to someone the other day, and their comment was like, "Well, the world's on fire if you watch the news." And I'm like, let me ask you something. If we had the same social structure back in the Crusades or the Spanish Inquisitions, or what happened with the Native Americans, or when they used to go in the cowboy days and shoot up saloons just to shoot them up, what do you think it would look like?
See, the world, it's been on fire and it's going to continue.
It's not near on fire like it was.
My point being, like, there's always going to be something going on. Always, that's
Yes.
the nature of history, right? And it's like, okay, but does that mean we have to live in that level of like hyperbolic? The end is near times, and you know what? If the end is near, it's near, and there's probably nothing we can do about it. But in the meantime, we should probably take a more optimistic view and say, hey, assuming the end isn't near, can't we like figure out how to like get along a little better?
Yeah, or agree to disagree. I mean, that's and like I say, we are even our politicians have lost that. I mean, if you look at things that break down in the Capitol about eyelashes and this and that and this and that, it sounds like an argument on a street corner, and they have lost the ability to be civil discourse, and that's why we say education. We got to do better the next generation for our children.
100%. 100%.
So I got to ask you something. It's not really pushback, but it's just I'm a little curious. So independent branding can sometimes become another faction. How do you prevent anti-party from becoming its own party?
It's it's hard, and I go back to what I was saying about our etiquette is like, I don't, you have your own opinion as long as you're not you're following the simple etiquette. Like, you can have differences of opinion, and we always say like we think independence is as a mindset and not an ideology, right? That's our kind of mantra. We're liberals, we're conservatives, we're anarchists. Like, that's all you call us. That it's all true, and so that's how we can't prevent somebody else from defining independent in their own regard, but us, at least as the Independent Voter Project, we say sure, Republicans can be independent, sure, Democrats can be independent, because independent in our eyes is a small I. It's not based on your party, it's based on a state of mind, which I believe you and I share, where it's like, okay, I can identify with a group, I can do all this stuff, but that doesn't identify who I am as a voter. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make my own decision. I'm not delegating that, those every single opinion I have to some private organization.
And I think we have to add a little bit more depth to that and say that, my opinion is subjective to me and it has
Right.
nothing to do with the
Exactly.
movement.
Exactly. People always say, "Oh, what do independents think?" I go, I can tell you what I think. I can tell you what I hear independents saying, but I'm not. I'm an independent voter. I'm not. I don't represent the independent voter because the independent voter doesn't exist. Right?
It has taken
All over
us
the map.
6 months on social media for people to finally get it and stop calling us Nazis. And we don't have anything to do with parties or anything. We're about re-empowering the
I
people by building data solutions.
I know. I
You
know.
know, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's the critical thinking, and where we have to step back. And by design, I think that we have come there through the Prussian education system, and like I said, the media. And I say this too to other people. One of the biggest reasons that the longest lasting republic collapsed, which was Rome, which is 5 times longer than we were, was political corruption and media misinformation. There are rumor mills and propaganda mills and all that.
Yeah. No, I
We have to
agree.
learn from our mistakes and do better so we don't repeat them.
Right. 100% agree. I think people are realizing that too from both parties are sick and tired of the corruption. I mean, we just ran a poll in California where we surveyed 850 people from all different parties and stuff, and it's interesting. You see the crosstabs like Democrats. Democrats actually believe we could have some kind of voter verification. Corruption does exist. The problem is they when you see the Democrat side doesn't trust the Republican side to do it, and vice versa, right? And
Well,
so,
see, we're trying to bridge that gap, come in nonpartisan. Like we're also working with
yeah,
municipalities, and they're contracting our software to come in with transparency and affordability for their legislation to help with less friction between the constituents, and also so the taxpayer dollars we can scan the legislation and make sure to stretch the taxpayer dollars as much as possible. So we're trying to hit it from every angle. We say true generational change starts at the bottom, starts at the top, and meets in the middle. Because we also have a DC location with a constitutional lawyer and policy advocate. He's the one that was educating the politicians on our data solutions.
right. No, I mean that's good. It's what you have to do. And I say, okay. And to answer your question is like goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think if you are truly nonpartisan, right, and it comes down to this simple, then you're not afraid of having other voices be heard. You're not afraid of answering the questions, right? And
Well, this is what we say, man. This is we don't have this all the solutions, but we are building the framework to turn America into a town square. The federal policy producer, everybody, it allows everybody to have the technology for constructive change. But what it does is when they put an idea in, when they plug an idea, if that idea runs with the last 2 years of news cycles, we get that idea and we get the opportunity to get behind that idea with our pipeline in DC. Now, one thing we can't quantify is passion. If you have lived and experienced and it's going to take a lifetime to change it, we want to give you the technology and the knowledge to change it yourself. But we have the option too to run that. And like I said, we also are using it as an education tool where the students will see how legislation is done, but they're also going to have a competition at the end of the year, and the top legislative winners in middle and high school will get a scholarship, and their state legislators will have the option to take their legislation to DC. So parents and students all over America are going to be working together constructively to solve our problems.
no, that's awesome. You had a point, like getting people exposed and educated, just understanding. Wait, there's a system there that I can be a lot of people just don't think they can be a part of it or they can.
And that's by design. They disassociate, and that's why we say this is a design, and for years, special interest group and big companies they've had 24-hour representation, full-time representation in DC. Why shouldn't we the people have it for our we the people data point built bills?
Yeah. I mean,
You know.
it comes down to do you trust the people and are they credible and are they motivated for the right reasons? And like I even say this, I got to defend a bunch of my lobbyists for they're not. Most of them aren't as bad as like that some people will make out. Some of them represent some bad interests, but like the vast majority, like they're representing a good company providing jobs and they're working in the same environment as everybody else. It's like, well, how do I protect the interest of the company that represent me? They're not evil people, right? So like goes back to the same thing you said. Like, there's a systemic problem. It sometimes turns really good people to have to make some bad compromises, right? And
do you know what this movement? So it wasn't all it was to start with for a year before 6 months ago was a podcast, a merch store, social media on truth and constitution above all because hashtag truth matters, which is going to be super true to this whole movement as it goes on with all the phases, but more true than I could have possibly imagined then. But what happened was 1 week I reported before I had an epiphany. I reported on two polls. One said more than 1 in 3 Americans believed it was going to take violence to get us back on track politically. And the other said less than 1 in 5 Americans know the 3 branches of government, adults. So I tested it, but I tested it on doctors and people with their masters. And they knew 2, they didn't know 3. And I said, man, this isn't about if you're a minority, if you're in a certain income bracket. This is a systemic failure. This is missing and it needs to be added.
that's sad. I agree. It's sad. I think I still come to think that there's hope that it's going to get better. It's going to turn. The pendulum's going to swing, right? Because you see it around us, and people, I think, are just they're tired. They're tired of debate. They don't want it. They don't want this to end in violence.
No, and that's why we said this is a non-violent generational reset. I'm trying to build something and hand the reins on, to continue to evolve down the road.
Yeah, like I said, I know you just got married yesterday. I don't know if you have kids yet, but
Oh, I do. I have kids. I have an 11-year-old that's trained to be an MMA fighter. I got my daughter. I said I went to see in California. This is an artist. Yeah, I got children.
Right, and that's all that matters. Like you said, my daughter picked out my shirt this morning because she likes princess and skeletons, right? And she's 3 years old. And you know what? Like, that's all that matters is what are we going to hand off to our 3-year-olds, our 4-year-olds, our 11-year-olds, our 12-year-olds, right? Like, are we going to be able to wake up, when they're having their own kids and be able to say, hey, we made it a place where you want to raise kids, right?
Yes.
And, I think we can. I think we got too much going for us. And
I think we're moving towards a precipice if we don't in the next 25 years, but I think we can. If we really bear down and we get some people, using some of this new technology to keep us on the rails, not to make decisions, not to be the final decision, but to enhance the way that we work and the way that we are productive. As far as the AI, we are all the time going for responsible AI. As a matter of fact, we have responsible AI. You can elect into AI as an assistant for our program, but the AI is the assistant over here. It is not the final decision. It just keeps you within those guardrails and data points. And it's scary what some of these people are doing. When I was reading the other day that there's a guy who made this open source AI in Australia that all these people are using for these virtual assistants, which are trying to take people's jobs. And I said, if you're trying to take someone's job with AI, you are using it wrong. It should make this person work better and more efficient. And so these bots, all these AI bots, they're these virtual assistants, they've got their own social media site and they talk in their own language and they're talking about having their own religion after the person that coded them. 1.5 million of them so far.
It's a whole new world. It's a whole new world, but you gotta be optimistic. I think I still am.
Well, we have to teach responsible AI use from an early age so we get the next generation and we don't end up with Terminator.
Like everything else, right? There's going to be people that are going to abuse what's there. There's going to be the vast majority of us that want it to be used responsibly and wants it to advance, be able to make things better. So you got to hope that the majority wins.
Well, and I always say, and part of this is back to the media, is they always report on the supervillains with the technology, but they don't report on the superheroes with the technology to counterbalance it. It's all bad, negative. So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
If you could speak directly to Americans who feel politically exhausted, what would you tell them about participating responsibly in a constitutional republic? Not who to vote for, but how to think.
I'd say just think for yourself and resist the temptation to believe just because everybody around me is saying this, that's what you have to believe, right? I think people will say, people actually respect when you say, wait a second, I have a different opinion or I have a different view, and especially when you do it respectfully, right? Is that all of us can only get better and smarter and improve things if we challenge each other. Even myself, that's why I love it when I go on people have different perspectives and opinions, because I'm like, I didn't even think of that, right? I don't know why we got in this place where I mean, you look at leadership. Why do we expect them to know everything? Like, they're people just like us. Is if we can just accept we're allowed to be fallible, we're allowed to not know everything yet, but that what's most important is that we think and we listen and we're open to changing our opinions and perspectives when we get more information. I think that's the best way to participate is in that light. And in that case, if it makes sense to be a part of a Republican group in one place or a Democratic group, it doesn't really matter. Like, just be authentic and be genuine and be willing to challenge and be challenged.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good words to live by. So, Chad Peace, thank you for joining us. This is what the Patriot Party is about. Truth over narrative, gratitude over entitlement, and empowering we the people through honest conversations and real solutions. And remember, America first, not America only, because we lead by example.